just on Callum McGregor, you mentioned Scott, we talked about it last night. I don't want to get too caught up in this again, but Green Machine says Callum doesn't owe Celtic anything. If anything, Celtic owe Callum. As Keith said, he gave up international career to concentrate on Celtic. And Marzuno says the same people yapping about McGregor have convinced themselves that Yang's a player. Just on McGregor, there's been stories going about today that there might be more interest from Saudi. Maybe he's interested in going. There's a wee bit of me thinking today, see if I was Callum McGregor, you couldn't really blame him if he went, you know what, I'm 32 now, big payday, something different.
I tell you that, he might be getting fed up reading people criticise
that's what I mean now.
for what he's given to Celtic, the performances he's put in, the trophies he's won, the service he's given. As I say, he's still only 32. Look, we mentioned it last night. I think that's going to be the interest in what happens with Callum McGregor in the summer. I think Frank McAvenny said yesterday he thinks he could go to Saudi with Brendan Rodgers, and who knows, there might be an offer there. Brendan's not doing really well in the Saudi league. They're just kind of off the top. He might no doubt they add players for next season. Maybe Callum McGregor's on that list. It's the type of move you could see happening if Callum McGregor was of that mind. And you said it last night. His natural instinct would always be to stay at Celtic because that's his club, that's his home. Don't doubt he would want to finish his career there. But if I'm in Callum McGregor's shoes and you're actually getting criticised for performances, when you look at this Celtic team, this squad, what he's given to it over the last 10 years, whatever it is, he might just feel, you know what, maybe I've had my time, maybe it's time to do something.
And John makes the points in the comments that when Scott Brown was in his last life, Celtic already had McGregor lined up as a replacement. Poor recruitment from Celtic this time means there's probably no one lined up if he was to leave.
It's interesting you say that because I've spoke to people and it's a brilliant point. Celtic have been so lucky, I think, to have Scott Brown and then a successor in Callum McGregor.
Is that luck? Because Callum McGregor was clever enough when he was coming through to look at Scott Brown, to identify his qualities, to think, whatever this guy does in the training ground, I'm going to copy it. Yeah. And Kieran Tierney did the same. If you remember, you used to get the shots, and it's December at Lennoxtown, up in the campuses, and the snow's coming bucketing down, and Scott Brown runs out for training with a short sleeve t-shirt on. And then Kieran Tierney starts doing the same. These guys all learn the qualities, the leadership qualities from Scott Brown, and were clever enough to say, I'm taking that on board. I don't think it's happened by luck or by accident.
What I mean, fans are lucky that they've had guys like that there. If you look across the city at Rangers, since I'd say like Barry Ferguson, for instance, I don't think Rangers have had that. I think they've suffered as a result. Celtic, even when Celtic haven't had many tough times in the last kind of 10 to 15 years in terms of winning trophies. But whenever there's been dips or whenever there's been any doubts, they've always been able to rely on a Scott Brown, a Callum McGregor to keep things together, keep the dressing room going.
Again, that didn't happen by accident. If you look around Lennoxtown, whether it's the staff, whether it's the coaches, whether it's the people who are working around the groundsmen, the kitchen staff, Celtic have created an environment where and it extends inside the dressing room in the shape of Callum McGregor, James Forrest, all these guys, people who actually live and breathe for Celtic, and it's come about over an extended period. Scott Brown's and all these guys that have come through around about a similar time, and that's deliberate. That didn't happen by accident. That was, and whereas, you know what, because Celtic have been so successful, there's not been the calls for a big clear out every summer and another purge here and get this one out. So they've been able to build this more settled environment, and it means when an Alistair Johnson comes in from nowhere, having just pitched up in Scotland for the first time, see, within a couple of days you're interviewing Alistair Johnson and he totally gets it already because he's surrounded by people who get it, and it seeps into the mindset. Rangers have been clear out after clear out after clear out. There's nobody there. There's no continuity. There's no continuity. There's very few people who are actually around the thing who represent Rangers Football Club the way that a Barry Ferguson. And I tell you what I would say about it is Andrew Kavanagh has been very, very shrewd over the last few months, having come in and sort of thought, right, rebuild and we'll start from scratch. And if you remember, how many times did I use the phrase, it will get worse before it gets better? and it was Kevin Thelwell, and it was this one and that one, and they just kept on moving further and further away from the identity of what Rangers are. And I think Andrew Kavanagh took a few months to realise that this was a misstep. And see, over the last 3 months, 4 months, maybe 5, whatever it's been, I think there's been a deliberate attempt to reach out and to reconnect and to speak to people that know the club, and to bring and to try and recreate the environment that was there previously. Now, Rangers are having to do that for a standing start, but Celtic, it's in the brickwork, it's in the foundations at Lennoxtown.
But if Callum McGregor goes,
You could be starting to move into a similar period.
That's the danger. I think. I know Kieran Tierney's still there.
James Forrest, but how long is he going to be
exactly. James Forrest might be away at the end of the season. I think that's why if McGregor goes, it'd be a huge blow to Celtic for so many reasons. The stuff on the pitch we've talked about, exactly what you're talking about there. I think Callum McGregor's to leave that Celtic dressing room, leave the club, leave a massive void there, and I'm not sure there's guys, unlike when he was able to step into Scott Brown's shoes, I don't think the same will happen again.
Well, you will have, because you'll have guys that have been in there and worked with him, and your Alistair Johnsons,
that's not the same.
Your Cameron Carter, but no, but I tell you what the difference is. The difference is they'll be inclined when the big offer comes this year, next year, whenever, they'll be off. And but before you know it, you've got a dressing room of guys in there that, no, I didn't work with Callum McGregor. So it's all alien, and then you need to try and find a way of spreading the word again and showing people what the DNA of the football club's supposed to be. Rangers have made that mistake, and that's why we were talking about it last night. And I said, if I was taking over as Celtic's new manager in the summer, first conversation I need to have is with Callum McGregor and say, I can't do this without you.
That's it. Did Brendan Rodgers know that with Scott Brown as soon as he got the job?
Exactly that.
Invited him down to his house.
Exactly that. And when he came back for the second time, first person he wanted to speak to, Callum McGregor.
Yeah.
A few people in the comments saying I'm breathing like Darth Vader into the mic, so apologies for that. On McGregor, Paulio says, I want Callum to get us over the line and head to Saudi for a few years and fill his pockets, and all Celtic fans should thank him and wish him well. Marzuno points out we paid a Scottish record fee for Brown. McKenna wants to know who we'd have as the next Celtic captain. Gavaldo says McGregor needs to move for his own sake to show he can do it in another club in another country.
McGregor, if he goes to Saudi Arabia, he's not going to be proving anything to anybody.
Aye, I know.
We're not going to be seeing it.
He's done it in Saudi Arabia though. Hugh throws the cat amongst pigeons, says Callum McGregor isn't anywhere near the level of any Rangers midfield in this moment in time.
Any Rangers midfield.
It says midfielder, sorry. And Tony Kelly says Raskin's the best midfielder in the league by far. What do you think of that? Oh, sorry, just to finish, Jimmy says he wants KT, Kieran Tierney, to take over as captain, and Rebel echoes that as well. She says next Celtic captain, player of the year for Celtic for me this year, Kieran Tierney. Interesting shout. But
it's the automatic choice.
He would need to take over
of course, for captain, aye. But I mean, interesting for player of the year. But McGregor nowhere near any Rangers midfielder.
Well, that's a nonsense, isn't it?
I love Callum McGregor, Mohamed Diomande, for instance, or Conor Barron. I think
it's just silly.
It's a bit wild.
It's a silly thing. Look, Raskin on his game, and I've said it, and I make no apologies for saying it. I've said it over an extended period, probably the last 12 months or so, and I don't think he's been great this season. But when he's on his game, I think he is the most complete, the best midfielder in Scottish football. I don't think that Rangers have had enough out of him this season, because he seems to be satisfied with playing this number 6 and convincing himself that all I need to do in a game is split the centre halves and build out from the back. See, when you get Nico Raskin playing the way that Nico Raskin played at the weekend there, that's a player that's the best centre midfield player in Scottish football. But Nico Raskin needs to be convinced of the fact that he's a better player when he does that in the Rangers shirt.